Schmaltz. I'm president of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District. And I'm going to call the meeting, the regular board meeting for today, January 9th. The time is a little past 6:30. So the first agenda item, and welcome to our meeting. The first agenda item is to call the regular meeting to order. And I'd like to start with a roll call attendance vote. So let me just call everyone. I'll start with Dave Bakke, answer present if you're here.
Present.
Thank you. Doug Taves,
Present.
Chris Loth.
Here.
I don't see Manager Anderson, but Manager Anderson. And then Steve Schmaltz present. So we have 4 of our 5 board members present. I'm hopefully that Manager Anderson will join us shortly. The weather's a little tough to get around in tonight. So with that, then let's move on then to setting the meeting agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the meeting agenda as published? Okay, hearing none, then I would like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda as published.
I will make the motion to approve the agenda as published.
Thank you, Manager Bakke. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Manager Taves. Are you gonna do the roll call votes?
I certainly can.
Yeah, okay. Victoria's gonna do the roll call votes for us.
Manager Bakke,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
and President Small.
Aye, so the motion carries. Moving on then to new business, we have a lot of pretty much regular items. So let's move on with the election of officers and liaison appointments. Is Administrator Kinney here tonight? I don't see him.
He's not here yet, but we expect him to join remotely.
Okay, thank you, Emily. So the first one is election of officers and liaison appointments. So why don't I lead into this then? We've done this each year in January. So we can either have option 1 or option 2 as far as the slate we want to follow. Why don't we follow option 1? So with that, do we have any candidates that want to run for president this year? Okay, Manager Anderson's not here. So I am looking not to run for president this year, just so everybody knows. I've done it for the last 2 or 3 years, and so I think it'd be nice. We've got a couple options. Manager Anderson has done it in the past. Rather than maybe having one person, we might have 2 people operate as the president, switch meetings. The role of the president is also to work with the administrator and trying to keep things on track and give him any advice that he might need during the year as things come up. So that's pretty much how that works.
President Schmaltz.
Yes, go ahead, Manager Taves.
I feel that my daytime availability kind of prohibits me from either the president or a full-time treasurer. I have to do one of those associate or assistant positions.
Okay, that's fine.
Manager Schmaltz.
Yeah, Manager Lowe.
I'm in the same position as Manager Taves.
Yeah, I know with full-time jobs, it's tough. So, let me, I have not had a chance to speak to Manager Anderson. I thought she was going to be at the meeting.
Manager Schmaltz,
let me ask, yes.
may I make a motion to table this topic until we have a full board membership and attendance?
I was gonna ask Manager, Council Holtman if we could do that, so thanks for the motion. maybe we can ask Vice of the Council Holtman on that motion before we second it?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Jackie's here.
Oh,
Jackie just joined.
Okay, Manager Anderson's here. Okay, good.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you. I accept the withdrawal. Uh, I don't see her on the list here, though. Is she? Okay, there she is. Manager Anderson, just to bring you up to date, we're working on item, new business, item A, election of officers and the liaison appointments. And we're looking for any volunteers to run for president. Do you have any thoughts on that, Manager Anderson?
She's still muted.
Manager Anderson, I believe you're still muted. Is she still on the list? I think she's dropped off the bottom.
She's unmuted, but there's no audio.
So she's not hooked up with us yet, is that correct? Why don't we postpone this part of the new business agenda until later in new business? Is everybody agreeable to that? Do I need a motion to do that, Council Holtman? Am I getting through? Emily, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I believe Chuck is in the process of unmuting.
Mr. Chair, my apology, I was unmuting here. You don't need a motion. You as chair can simply move this a bit further down the agenda if you wish.
Yeah, why don't we move it to right before item E, district vehicle? And then let's continue on and get some of these boilerplate decisions out of the way. Let's move on then to the Citizen Advisory Committee appointments. And is Aiden, are you want to lead this, please?
Yep, I can do that. Mr. President and managers, this list here is the current CAC members, all of whom have requested to be reappointed, except for Mr. Rich Johnson of Forest Lake. And so I can recommend that all of those members be reappointed to our CAC in 2025.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a board manager to make that motion that's listed at the bottom of the sheet?
I will move to appoint Tom Fury, Jerry Gruntner, Randy Shoemaker, Kurt Sparks, Ted Hansen, Rich Johnson, and Mike Marin to serve as district citizen advisory committees for 2025.
Thank you, Manager Taves. I'll second that motion. Any discussion or comments?
If I could add a point of information, Mr. President, Rich Johnson would like to be omitted from being appointed this year.
So I'm
Must
not
be.
sure I understood what you said. I got a lot of feedback on your comment, Aiden.
I'm hesitant to talk. All right.
I'm trying to troubleshoot the source of the audio feedback. Not sure what it is.
Okay, so am I getting feedback again, Emily, or not?
You're good on
You're
my
not.
end.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
you're good on
then,
my
All
end.
right.
so Aiden, can you turn your volume, off or down?
I think the feedback issue's been resolved. So,
Okay, good.
but just wanted to share a point of information that Rich Johnson did not want to be appointed to the CAC. So the motion as stated included Mr. Johnson. I would recommend that he not be included.
Okay,
My
thank
apologies.
you.
I will amend the motion.
Okay, and then I'll second as amended then. So any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll ask Victoria to do the roll call vote.
Absolutely. Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
I think you might be muted, Manager Lowe.
Try to unmute one more time, please, Chris. Sorry about that.
Right, it said I couldn't unmute myself, but I can now, and I vote in favor of.
Okay,
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
and President Schmaltz.
aye. So the motion carries and we have a renewed board of, for the CAC. Thank you, Aiden. Moving on to the next one is the designation of official newspapers and banks. Okay, on this one then,
I'll make the motion.
do we need a motion? I guess we do need a motion on this, don't we? Okay.
Yeah. So I will move motion 1 to designate the official newspapers of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District for 2025 as the Chisago County Press and the Forest Lake Times.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
I will second.
Any other additional discussion or comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll ask for Victoria to call the roll call vote again.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
and President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries on the newspapers. We need a motion now for the bank. Official banks.
I
I'll
will
make-
move to designate First Resource Bank and Midwest One Bank as the official financial repositories of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District for 2025.
Thank you, Manager Baki. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, then we'll ask Victoria to call the, do the roll call vote.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
and President Schmaltz.
Aye, so motion carries. Okay, that moves us down to, item A, which we're going to readdress here, the election of officers and liaison appointments. And we had earlier decided we were gonna try to follow the option 1. Unless someone has an objection. So I'll ask again, do we have any candidates interested in running for president?
I'll do that.
Okay, Manager Anderson has volunteered to act as president. Help me here, Councilwoman, do we have to approve each item as we go forward, or do we do a slate and vote on the slate?
Mr. Chair, no one has made a motion for a slate, and you are proceeding office by office now. So Manager Anderson has nominated herself for president, and if there are no other nominations for president, then you will close nominations and the board will vote on that office, and then you'll proceed to vice president and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations for president? Okay, hearing none, then I will ask Victoria to do the roll call vote on president.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
and President Schmaltz.
Aye. So Manager Anderson will be serving as president for 2025. Thank you, Manager Anderson. Next office to be considered is vice president. Do we have any volunteers for vice president?
I'm happy to,
Go ahead.
I'm happy to continue in that capacity unless someone else wants to trade who is in a non-treasurer role.
We have to do this in order. Is that correct, Council Holtman?
Yes. Again, you could, there are two different sequences that are recommended, and it's up to you as the chair in the first instance, and the board generally to choose one of those sequences. So you can option 2 would have the treasurer next, because the president, treasurer, and secretary are the 3 offices mandated by the statute.
So I'm going to take it upon myself then to make a recommendation, or do I have a motion to move to option 2?
You can just declare it, and a manager can object if anybody objects to that.
So as president, I declare that we move from option 1 to option 2, unless there's some strong objections. And hearing none, then let's move on then to addressing filling the role of treasurer. So do we have any volunteers for treasurer?
Mr. Chair, just a
Yes.
small note where you're asking people who are interested. I would just say that it's a matter of nomination, so any manager can feel free to offer up another manager to one of these positions.
Okay,
I
are there any nominations?
Can I ask a procedural question?
Go ahead, Manager Anderson.
Yeah, we started out on option 1, and we have a volunteer for vice president, on the floor. So why are we switching to option 2? I'm just curious.
Because I think it's important that we fulfill the treasurer's role and the secretary's role before we get into the vice president and assistant treasurer. I should have probably considered that at the beginning.
Okay.
President Schmaltz,
Manager Lowe.
haven't we done this in the past where we decided the 5 positions and then voted them all in at once?
Mhm.
Yes, we've done that before.
Can we do it that way just for efficiency purposes?
I think we probably can, unless Council Holtman has advice to the contrary.
Mr. Chair, Manager Lowe, strictly speaking, since you've had a motion on president, that may be out of order, but if the board as a whole wants to proceed that way and comes to a slate by consensus, and then there's a motion and a second for that, I don't believe anybody is going to take issue.
All right, thank you. So if everyone, I think everyone agrees to that, let's proceed that way. Are there any other nominations? Or anyone interested in nominating themselves for any of these positions?
I'll nominate Manager Schmaltz for the treasurer.
I've served as treasurer before I became president, so I think it would be good for someone else to get the experience of being treasurer. Now, Manager Anderson spent a great deal of time on this, as you probably know. I'm not sure that the bylaws call for that extensive amount of time and reviewing every invoice.
It does. It's the most extensive position in the officers. There's a good system that's down now, I think, and we've caught mistakes and we've caught errors, and so I think it's worth sticking with that. But it is listed out very distinctly and clearly in our bylaws.
Manager Taves and I have already said that due to work restrictions, neither of us are have the bandwidth to serve in a capacity other than as vice president or assistant treasurer. So I guess that leaves Manager Baki without voting him in or putting him on the spot as anyone else that would be able to take the treasurer position besides President Schmaltz.
Let me ask a question. Emily, do you have a copy of the bylaws handy?
I can pull that up momentarily, one moment.
Yeah, I'd like to just review actually what the detail, I kind of remember that it wasn't that reviewing every invoice was required. But that's something we should confirm, that's true. You know, we've had audits every year and we've passed the audit without any issues, which indicates to me that the procedural financial procedures we have in place, not to say that we aren't making mistakes every once in a while, but that the amount of control we have today has been pretty good. And for certainly it has been with Manager Anderson because she's been so thorough.
President Schmaltz, I have the bylaws. If you would like to go through them, I can just search the word treasurer, if you like, or
Yeah, if you would, I can't see that real well with that size, even with my other glasses. Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
just to suggest, I think you may be referring to the internal controls manual, which itemizes the tasks assigned to each different individuals, including the treasurer. The treasurer's duties are in the internal controls policy, which is at page 20 of the governance manual.
Governance manual, that's right.
thank you, Chuck. Is that big enough?
Okay, it does look like Manager Ender was correct in terms of having to review the invoices.
Well, everything else that goes along with that, though. I mean,
Correct.
there's quite a bit of oversight. This isn't unusual for a city government. There always should be a people's representative that is looking over what's happening, even when you have professionals in. It goes a lot quicker. I'll tell you, it took a lot more time in the couple of years prior, but with Tory in that position, it's going much smoother. But we do find mistakes. I mean, there are checks that are not correct. There are things that come from Redpath that aren't correct, that get caught in that monthly review. So it's very critical to have this and to follow all of the indicators here on what needs to be monitored.
Manager Schmaltz.
Let me ask you, what does the assistant treasurer do?
Fills in for the treasurer when the treasurer is not available.
Right, or can't the treasurer delegate some of this to the assistant treasurer?
Oh, well, why? Why would you need to do that?
To carry the workload a little bit.
Well, it's not that much. I mean, it's not that big of a workload. Takes a few hours once a month, and that's it.
Can we hear what Manager Baki was going to ask? Because frankly, it's either him or Manager Smalls. So
Manager Baki, go ahead.
I heard Manager Taves nominate Manager Schmaltz for treasurer.
Right, and my reply was that, in the previous, how long were you president, Manager Anderson?
Also-
Before I took over.
Pardon me?
I was serving as treasurer for a number of years before Manager Anderson took.
Yeah.
um,
The only time
over.
I was vice president for 16 years. And the only time I was president was when someone passed away. One of our presidents passed away. So I filled that spot for about 18 months. And then one other time I was president for a year. So it hasn't been that long. I mean, it hasn't been that long of a time as president. As treasurer now, I think I'm going into my 4th year. I'd have to look it up. It's either 3rd or 4th.
Manager Baki, you were gonna say something?
Yes, sir, and I did. I said that Manager Taves nominated Manager Schmaltz as treasurer.
and I'll second that nomination.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Council Holtman.
just another process note. Anyone who's nominated can accept or decline a nomination.
No, I realize that. I was thinking about nominating someone else, so there's a vote.
Here-
But
Here's a question for Chuck. Chuck, can one person serve two offices?
Manager Anderson, I believe the bylaws say that one manager can only serve one office.
Okay. So if you have a situation where no one wants a position, then what do you do?
I believe you have to sort through that. The statute does mandate president, treasurer, and secretary.
Okay.
The bylaws provide for the other two offices. The bylaws can be suspended temporarily or can be revised.
So serving two offices with one person can be done with a what, a variance? An abeyance? What?
You would want to amend the bylaws.
Okay,
But the treasurer certainly has right to delegate responsibilities to other people. In any organization, I would suspect, just through basic management practices. Now, they're ultimately accountable for the responsibility. They have the authority to delegate work.
yeah,
So I guess that's the point I was making, is that, you know, we have staff that are doing this, you could come in and check and do things to make sure things are going correctly. The audits do a lot of that for us already. Like I say, we've had very few issues with the audits. So that's something else to consider. I'm just trying to get people to get additional experience within the organization without having to commit an inordinate amount of time of doing every little invoice. So
you're missing the point.
excuse me?
You're missing the point. The point is to have a member of the board, which is a representative of the public, overseeing this very critical area for any organization. And this is not just for us. This is very common. I did it on the town board.
Right.
The counties have a commissioner who is assigned to a role like this. Now, it's going to be a lot easier when we have the business manager in and we get a computer system that syncs up with the auditors, because this manual stuff doesn't have to happen. And this double entry that we're doing all the time, it's actually 3 separate entries that happen. It's 3 different people are inputting things before it becomes final. So there's always opportunity for human error. And you don't have that when you have a computer system. So this thing is going to get easier for a board member going forward, but not until we get the right computer system in place. And then you get reports. You don't have to go through every invoice, although I recommend it so that you don't have the problem that I think it was Blaine last year when there was $2 million missing that nobody could account for. So, and that's a big city. So things like this happen. That's why you need that people oversight. So it is important. This job is important. But if we don't have board members that don't want to take on that responsibility, I think we can't force them. That's fine. We have a way out, which is to suspend the rules or make new ones that say in situations where individuals, there aren't people stepping up for the jobs or willing to do the jobs, then we can have one person do 2 things. That's the only way out, as I see it. And you don't want to make.
I will accept the nomination of treasurer.
Okay.
So then we've got the other 3 positions to fulfill. And I would suggest that we have different people in different positions with the remaining 3 people. So the rest of the board gains some experience and confidence to find out more about what's going on in the organization.
I'll just note, you should have a vote. You're the sole nominee for treasurer. You should have a vote or at least just determine that it's unanimous consent.
Well, I thought we were gonna fill out the slate and then vote on it. So let's proceed that way. So, Manager Lowe served as vice president last year. And who was secretary? I think Manager Bakke?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those last three responsibilities aren't as significant as the first two. So there might be some value in trading those positions off just to gain a better understanding of what's going on within the organization. But I'll leave it up to you. If you don't want to do it with that, it's fine with me too. Just making a suggestion.
Does Manager Taves or Baki want to take over the vice president's position? If not, I will serve through the rest of this year as the vice president. My term is up in September and I won't be able to be renewing that, so
So you're not gonna reapply in September then, Chris, as far as, is that what you're saying?
that is correct. I just got with a new baby and work, it's just
Too much, yeah.
I can't do more than what I'm currently doing, so
Right.
it just makes sense to open that
Well, I
spot up
appreciate
to
you
someone
letting
else
us
that
know
can do
because-
more than I can.
Yeah, I appreciate letting us know because it takes a while to get a replacement, so that's good to know. Thank you for doing that. So maybe we should keep the positions the way they are then, if since everybody was satisfied last year, which would put Manager Lewis as vice president and Manager Baki as secretary, and I think wasn't Manager Taser as assistant treasurer?
Yes,
So are you all okay with that? Repeating what we did last year?
I am.
Works for me.
Okay, so if that's hearing no objections, then let's do a roll call vote for president's been already approved. We'd be approving the treasurer, which I've assumed responsibility for, the secretary, which would be Manager Baki, Manager Loos for vice president, and Manager Taves as assistant treasurer. So let's do are there any additional discussion or changes on that?
Okay, just for
hearing none.
clarification, I'm not clear. Who will be president and who will be treasurer?
I'm going to be treasurer, and Manager Anderson's going to be president.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, you should make a motion for that slate.
So we'll make the motion as I did before, but we're adding the president in that slate to be fulfilled by Manager Anderson for 2025. Any other comments or discussion? Okay, hearing none, then I'll ask Victoria to do the roll call vote for us.
Mr. Chair, is there a second for that motion?
Oh, thank you very much. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Manager Taves. Any additional discussion or comments? Okay, hearing none, then Victoria, could you do the roll call vote?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
and President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries and we have our new slate for next year. Thanks, everyone, and congratulations. Okay, moving on. Next item is the district vehicle, which is a new item for us. So,
President Schmaltz,
Liaison appointments.
yes, is that Manager Baki?
right, I think we have to revisit the liaison appointments for the
Oh, that's
cities.
correct. I skipped over that. You're right. Thank you. So today we have the listing as we see here. Let's just go down the list. City of Forest Lake and with Manager Schmaltz and Manager Loth. Would you continue on with that this year, Manager Loth, or?
Fine.
Okay. Wyoming was Manager Anderson.
Yes, I'll still do that.
Okay. City of Scandia, Manager Baki.
Yes, I'll continue in that role.
Thank you. Chisago City Managers Anderson and Taves.
Yep, it's
Yep.
okay.
Yep, here too.
Okay, and then Chisago Lake Township, Manager Taves.
I'll take that.
Washington Conservation District Managers, Manager Schmaltz and Manager Loth. Again, I'll do that, Chris, if you don't necessarily have to if you don't want to. It's up to you.
I think it's okay to list both, just in case.
Okay,
You need
yeah,
a,
that's fine for backup.
yeah, doesn't happen very often.
Chisago Soil and Water Conservation District, Managers Anderson and Taves,
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
okay? Personnel Manager, again, I think it'd be good to get someone else in that position, again, working with Administrator Kinney and Ellen, our personnel person.
Isn't that usually the president that does personnel?
I don't know, I can't remember how we did that last year, Manager Anderson.
Well, I thought that was a duty of the president, and then we appointed me to help in that because we were dealing with, a lot of it.
Okay.
So I think it's good to keep it that way.
All right. So we'll put Manager Anderson down for personnel to work with Mike on that then.
And if we need to another member of the board, we can address that like we did last year. We can address that, during
Now,
the,
Manager Baki has been very helpful in working with the, some of the, performance of, on Smart Gold, et cetera, with Manager, Kinney, so he might be a good backup, since he's kind of got one foot into the area already.
if he's willing.
If he's willing, I'm just suggesting it.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, I'd be happy to assist.
So we'll put both of you down then, as Manager Baki as a backup, or else just to participate where necessary to gain some experience,
Okay.
okay?
Yep.
Citizen Advisory Committee. So this is, I had written a note to Aiden asking about that. He has not had a chance to get back to us, but he'll probably send out a note asking for volunteers, and I think that worked out well last year. And so, maybe we could just take off from the rotation we had last year and fill in like we did last year. Let's see what Aiden comes up with though.
Mhm.
All right, and then the Lower St. Croix Watershed One Plan Policy Committee. That was Manager Anderson with a Manager Baki as an alternate.
I'm willing to keep that.
You gonna keep that, Manager Anderson? And
I said I'm-
Manager Baki, do you wanna stay as a backup?
Yes,
Okay, good, thank you. So I don't think there's a motion required for this, is there, Council Holman, just an agreement among us on this?
There's no motion required, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So then we'll just go as we've decided here, and we'll have this maybe retyped for the record only as part of the minutes.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. So then moving on then to the next item E, which would be the driver vehicle decision we have to make tonight.
Mr. Chair, there's a bank signers item at D.
I'm sorry, Council Holman, repeat that?
The agenda item at 3D is a bank signers item before district vehicle.
I thought we approved that, didn't we?
no. Not yet.
You approved bank depositories. You approved the district's banks.
Okay,
This is it represents every board manager and Mike as signers. And then Emily
yes,
Corey, who worked very closely, obviously with all of the accounting information. That's appropriate. And then the card holders, the reason my name is on the card holders, the one account that we have with Midwest, I think I think I have it right, Midwest One. They required a officer to be on the card John Spence was on, it took us 2 years to get his name off and my name added. So that's why my name is there. And that can stay until I'm no longer on the board.
Mr.
Okay, so do we have to just accept this verbally or do a motion? I don't see a motion associated with it.
Mr. Chair, may I offer 2 comments?
Yes,
One is, and I talked with Mr. Kinney earlier this week about this. I would advise that Mr. Kinney should not be a bank signer. Under the district's policies, only the managers are authorized to sign checks. This is something that was this naming of signers reflects a similar array that was presented last year, and Mr. Kinney was included, and that was my oversight at that time. I went back and looked at that. But I think per your bylaws and policies, signers are simply the managers.
Hmm.
And my other comment is just to ask the question, and I don't have the credit card policy in front of me, but I tend to think that Manager Anderson is the holder and authorized user in her role as treasurer, which would suggest that it should be changed to President Schmaltz. Though if it takes 2 years to accomplish that, that's a bit counterproductive.
I would think so, but we can try.
so can Manager Kinney, continue as an authorized user of the credit card? Obviously, yes, right?
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah. So then we should proceed to change that under your recommendation, is that right, council?
yes, I would advise to Mr. Kinney to remove himself as a signer.
Okay, and then replace Manager Anderson as a credit card authorized user. And put my name in place?
Yes, unless that proves too difficult and we can look at the credit card policy and adjust it.
Yeah, it should go smoother, but you know, like I said, it took a long time. We had to get John involved, and they weren't responding to the things that he was giving them, and so it just took forever. But I'm perfectly willing to start the process. I think it should be easier this time because we've got a trail now of who to work with and how to get it done.
I'm not clear what the difference between a credit card holder and a credit card authorized user.
These are actual business cards. It's very common in business. You have a business credit card, but the individual user is listed as the holder of the card. And of course, there are parameters, there's limits that go into it and so forth. But when you're dealing with employees, but that's you're a representative of the organization, basically. And the only person that can change those names or credit limits or anything is the holder of the card. That has to also be, in this case, an officer of the organization. It's not a difficult process. I've dealt with this for years, decades, and never had any issues like the issues we had with Midwest One. So it's just this particular bank that makes it a very difficult process. But we've got it all straightened out now, like I said, and I think it should be much easier this time around. Both of us are still with the district, so I don't anticipate an issue like we had with John, who is no longer with the district, but still had that authority position according to the bank.
So if Tori needs to order office supplies, she has to go to you or Kenny or Eichner?
No,
To use their credit card to buy
No.
something?
no, no. it's set up that she is an authorized stand-in for me. You can set it up that way for business cards. So usually the office manager has that authority, and she has it.
Well, this description is not very, very clear to me. A holder means somebody's got the card in their wallet, in my opinion. That's what holder means, I think. And then a user means, which is, how can you be a user without having holding the card?
Mr.
So
Chair,
this is very confusing.
I don't use it. It stays in the office,
I think
and Tori is authorized to use the card. It's very common in business, Steve, in my experience.
if I can offer though, it might be terminology confusion. To my understanding, the holder is a party who's authorized to sign and make transactions with the card. The user is a party that is authorized to make changes to the account itself. And your policy allows the administrator to authorize staff members to use the card. And so Blaine has been authorized, and from Manager Anderson's comment, so has Tori. But the phrasing holders and users that's not our language, that's the bank's language. And I think it's backwards kind of from the way you would think of it.
Absolutely, I agree on it. So we have to stay with that language? On our own internal records?
To be in sync with the bank, you should.
Okay. Okay, sorry, we got off track on that. Let's just roll with it then, and if you want to move ahead, Manager Anderson, and have my name replace yours, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board on this before we get off of it? So does this require a motion then, Council Holman, or not? Because it says action on here, and I see it.
Well,
There's no form-
if we're going to take Mike off of the signers column, we should have a motion, and I'll make that motion to remove, on advice of council, to remove Mike Kenny, the administrator, from the signer list.
And to replace Manager Anderson as a credit card holder with my name.
Correct. And I'll add,
Okay, so is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Manager Taves. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, then we'll ask Victoria to do the roll call vote on this motion.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
aye.
and President Schmaltz.
Aye. So the motion carries then. Thank you. Okay, now moving on to, I think, item E, the driver of the district vehicle question proposal.
So, Mr. President, managers, district staff, we've calculated how much annual reimbursement that we pay to staff to use their own vehicles. And so presently they're required to have them, carry their own insurance and such. And then, but some of the things is that given some of the conditions, they may have to pull off into the road or into a site that's a construction area, get their vehicles dirty or track mud into their vehicles, things like that. So they have been asking previously, and I was kind of hoping that we would maybe be in a different location office-wise, but now it's likely that this will not be the case for a few more years. So kind of given just the, both the interest of staff, but also just the economics of what we're paying, and along with the possibility of taking advantage of some credits, I'm not fully set on necessarily buying an EV, but I don't want the board to be surprised if we do. I've been in conversation with this state contract, individual for the dealership that has the state contract. And that, makes it more attractive, from, getting something like an Equinox or, their Chevy vehicle. Cause then also like Adam going to different events could load up his things and such. People could go to meetings around the metro if they wanted to. And so it still wouldn't be a problem for that standpoint. Obviously, the one challenge, and I had sent an email to the office for the contact Scott Craignister about, this. I've also done a little bit more research on the vehicles themselves. This particular model you can plug into a 110 or a 220 outlet. You don't need a fast charger. So I might recommend the 220, having a 220 outlet put on the outside of the building, and then we could charge there, just off our own until something gets decided one way or the other. But it's just an option, but either way, it's really about the discussion about a vehicle itself, I guess, first and foremost, and then it's, secondary to that is whether or not there'd be support for an EV. So. We could pay, I did price it out, we could pay a little bit more and just get a conventional internal combustion engine vehicle. So.
Well, okay, so basically, somebody want to make this motion and then we can get a second and then have a discussion. If somebody will second it. Is anybody willing to make the motion?
No, I'm not. I think we need a bigger study of how the vehicles get used. When you were talking about it, Mike, I heard two different purposes. One was to go out in the field and do the inspections and, get muddy and all of that kind of thing. And the other one was more of a business use for Adam to go to these education forums. You don't want to use the same vehicle to do that. It would be in the the shower, if you will, a car wash every day. So I think a little bit deeper study into what we need would be helpful before making a motion to fund a purchase.
Okay. Well, Mr. President, managers, Manager Anderson, I can tell you. So, staff inspections typically are during the early part of the day, and those occur 3 to 4 days a week, depending on the conditions and number of permits. Adam's work typically is later in the evening or later in the day or evening. So there would not be conflicting. Regardless, we would want to have the vehicles maintained. So, in decent condition. So.
President
Well, how
Schmaltz.
many people, we just don't have 2 people that are out in the field. Don't we have monitoring and all this kind of stuff that's going on all the time? So when I come in here, there's nobody in the office most of the time. So they must be out in the field, right? So having one more car, you can't get rid of your insurance if you still need it when you can't get one of those 2 cars. So that was one question I had. The other question was that at $3,900 a year at 70 cents per mile, that's about 5,000 miles a year we drive the car. That's not going to be big EV savings for us, gas savings, is it? That's because usually you get an EV when you drive a lot of local miles, right? You save on gas. And electricity is a lot safer. So and then also the insurance on the car, how much is that in the $3,900 that we save, or is that,
that's the 3,900 is, yes, what we reimburse staff for now outside of that. So I've been interested in this topic for myself for a long time, so I've kind of looked into this. You would, just whatever the kilowatt rate right now would be about 10, 11 cents depending on the season. And that would equate to about 5 to 6 cents a mile for the energy cost compared to an SUV that's typically 15 to 18 cents for gas and a comparable. So there would be savings regardless how many miles you're at. So the outlay up front is less than a traditional vehicle. You know, there would be some additional cost in hiring an electrician to put an outlet in, you know, on the outside for a 220. But that would be it. And then based on my calculations, we could charge during the week when it's not in, you know, during the hours. If they went out in the morning and we're back early afternoon, they could plug it in for a few hours. It's not like it's every day, but during the spring through fall season, the truck is used probably 4 days a week or something. So it's never been really available for the permitting staff. So they're two different areas. But yes, we can provide more information if that's the board's request. No problem.
I think so, because the other question is, my impression was that to justify an electronic vehicle, you have to drive a lot of miles to get the difference in savings that you were talking about. And so therefore, because you're paying a premium of 30-some% or even more than that. So your payback on the thing, unless you're driving a lot of miles, it's not there. So maybe what we ought to look at also is it better to buy a gas car or electric car? If we're gonna need a car, and then compare those two.
Well, the
President
EV, the electric car with the $7,500 rebate right now is cheaper than a gas powered car of the same type. You know, if you were getting a small SUV like a Chevy Equinox, you would pay more for the gas version than you are the electric version. And then it's cheaper to operate per mile on the electricity than it is in gas. So
I'm operating on old information, and so I apologize for that.
Yeah, I'm glad you,
When I looked at them a number of years ago, there was a big premium difference for them, so.
sure, yeah, right. And if you buy, yes, and that's absolutely, you would need to, so on certain vehicles, right, if you're getting a Tesla, there's a lot of vehicles where it does not make sense. But the GM platform that they have in that particular car is the most, I mean, I was surprised actually by the price. I was expecting it to be maybe another $15,000 higher. But that's the state contract, and that's what, well, if you're looking at the market all, you know, there's an abundance of vehicles. The inventory is stacking up. They want to move them. So there's incentives, I'm sure, both from GM and the dealer to move vehicles. It's
and you get the government discount too, right?
correct, and that may go away. There's a lot of discussion on it. Then it changes the economics if we waited a month, potentially, you know, so.
Well, that changes my opinion from what I was feeling before, so I think, we don't have to look at the gas, the economics of this, clearly in favor of the EV then, if we can get that kind of a deal on it. And
President-
if you're taking insurance out already on that, that's fine too, so. The
President
other
Schmaltz?
question I think is, we need to see what other people are doing. I mean, even though we're only buying one EV, it's not like we're buying a whole fleet, but, what are some of the other, what's the city? Do they have any EV cars, or do they use personal cars when they have to run around? Does anybody know? And Washington County the same way?
Wyoming and Forest Lake have company cars or government cars.
President Schmaltz? President Schmaltz?
Yes, go ahead, Manager Taves.
Just two observations. I've had quite a bit of traffic in and out of here over the last 2 years with this project and other things relating to the lake. And I think now I recognize most of the staff's vehicles. Like, it strikes me that it'd be really nice if we have somebody going out doing these permits, checking on permits, negotiating with people. It'd be nice to have an identification on a vehicle when they go out there rather than driving in with a personal vehicle. It makes a statement for us especially since we're looking at putting signage up to identify when people are driving into the watershed area, it'd be nice to identify our vehicles some way or the other. The second observation is that a big focus going forward for us is flood mitigation as a result of the effects of climate change. This may, going to an EV is a big statement that we are serious about this. I gave up a minivan 20 years ago, and my second vehicle 15 years ago, we went to Priuses because that was the best we could get. We cut our gas consumption by 60%.
Mm.
And I guess, you know, they're not the sexiest cars, but my goodness, that sure is nice at the pump to pull away with a
Yeah.
fraction of what the pickup next to me is filling up for. I think it's a statement for us if we were to go that direction. And the identification, I think, is pretty important to make us have a better standing in the community and be recognized for what we do.
I agree with both of your statements.
Yeah, I think those are very good observations, Manager Taves, especially the identification one. That's worth a lot of money to us, I think.
Mhm.
We have very little of that now, so.
President Schmalz,
Manager Lowe, go ahead.
can someone from staff clarify? I think I've seen some vehicles with a magnet, Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed magnet on the side of it. Is that
Yes.
correct? And are staff that are going to these sites using those, or is that only used for? I've seen it when I've run by the second launch in Forest Lake. I've seen the vehicle with the magnet on it. Is that something that's being used in addition to the watershed inspectors?
Well, certainly, well, the truck often has it on them because we keep an extra set of magnets or signs there with the vehicle, so it's convenient. I think it's really, you know, we do have spare ones only because those other from my experience, those magnetic ones, we have lost some just even on the pickup truck, because if it's a little dirty or cold or certain conditions, they're not, you know, not guaranteed to stay on, you know, under certain weather conditions. So, but I think also just practically speaking, given the 5 different staff that may be out doing permitting at any one time, I guess probably out of sight, out of mind. So unless it's sitting, you know, in their vehicle, they may not think about putting it on. And so we just haven't made that strong of an effort for it. So, but yes, we do have those, and I think it would be at some point we've talked about now that, and I guess we could probably come back to this, but we talked about for the truck getting something more permanent, but we've been waiting for the logo to be completed, and we did that a year ago or so. So we could come back to that. So that's a good reminder. Because we could have it wrapped or something like that, even, you know, work with Adam, and just like we do that, the street sweeper gets wrapped every year, but we could just do it once. And
We pulled a lot of information out in this discussion, so, and I've changed my mind from where I was before, so. Do we need to get additional information, or how does everybody feel about this? Manager Anderson, you had some concerns up front. Have you changed your thoughts a little bit, or do you think we need to do additional work on this? That hasn't been covered tonight.
Yeah, I just wonder if one is enough. That was my point, is that we've got multiple people going out and doing permitting. They don't travel together, right? They go to different sites. And so we're still going to have people using their personal vehicles. So I just thought a bit deeper evaluation of what our true need is. I always got super discounts when I bought multiple cars at a time. And so we might be in a position where we need to get 2 or 3. I don't know. That's what I was getting at, is have we really looked at this to see if this is really going to solve our problem?
Well, if you're gonna do that, then you need to look at a payback, because, you know, that's what it really gets down to, our responsibility to the public. You know, this at $4,000 savings in a $28,000 car, that's a 7-year payback.
right.
Nobody spends, would you spend as a farmer, spend your money to get your money back on a barn for 7 years?
But that-
You know, so you gotta ask yourself, would you do this if it were your own money? And even though there's climate involved, et cetera, you know,
That's the
how
premise
much
of,
is-
premise of this whole thing, though, is saving money. Saving gas money. I don't know what the electricity would go up to. We need to understand that too. There might be a balance. I don't know. But
that's the point. The point is that this
But-
$3,900 savings, everything's worked into that number already. And so if you're gonna spend $28,000 and you're gonna put in, and you're gonna, you know, save $3,900 a year, that's 7 years before you get your money back.
is 3,900 though for every car that is used by an employee, or is it just one vehicle?
It's the cumulative, yes, in the last year, so,
Get that savings on one vehicle.
right, so, but the way the permitting staff typically operate is it's not typically done in the same day. They will rotate through, for a variety of reasons, taking different routes and being able to do some cross inspections, and then they change every week, which pods, so to speak, they do, which areas of the district. So there would not necessarily be a lot of overlap. And again, just looking at the normal schedules of the permitting, the inspection work and other potential use of the district, including education, we'd feel one vehicle would be sufficient. There's also just the practical component of parking, right? So, you know, that we run into situations when we do have our all staff meetings on Mondays, typically that parking lot is full and then some, and I'm sure some of the customers may need to be either going through the drive-through or going around front for the coffee shop, but if we were in our own building, we could have a different discussion, but even then, I think from a payback standpoint, just a return on investment, I think the singular vehicle at this point is sufficient.
Question, Mr. President?
Go ahead, Manager Taves.
Is there a cost to the district for liability insurance when employees use their own vehicles for business use?
So, so the district does carry insurance, but not necessarily, auto insurance. We would buy the auto insurance here, but it's super inexpensive for whatever reason through the League of Minnesota Cities. And I think for the truck, it's only, I'd have to go back and look, but I think it's under $500 a year or something.
My question has to do with when one of the employees takes their personal vehicle out and gets T-boned and injured. Our policies have to pick that up, don't they?
Well, yes, but we still require that they carry insurance as well on their vehicle.
Sure.
So, but I have had this question. So district would, carry the liability. They are working at the time, so that would be, almost regardless of what vehicle they're in, even if they're riding in with somebody else or anything like that, they would be under workers' comp and other insurance features of the district. Yes.
Okay.
But it is also the hassle, if somebody was to get their private vehicle in an accident on work business, think of the inconvenience that is, that then comes into play. And a lot more complicated, frankly, for the district and I guess probably the administrator having to deal with then the go between the League of Minnesota Cities and the insurance agent and their insurance and such. So so there's definitely some potential additional savings there that's not built into this discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point you make there, Mike, is that is it an inconvenience or is it a risk for the employee? And as an employer, if we can get around that, that would be better. I think we could do that. So.
Yeah,
Maybe
good question.
Doesn't have to be a 2 or 3 times payback. So, it could be because of other extenuating circumstances that we have to deal with. So,
To the, one other question, Mr. President, that somebody asked, I know that a lot of the state agencies have purchased EVs. They have, many of them, they have charging stations at their offices. I believe Washington County has some. I'm not familiar with the others, but typically Public Works, they're just gonna buy pickup trucks. So they don't, what the staff have, outside of that, I don't know. But police departments typically are still gonna, because of the long idling time and other things, are gonna buy the gas vehicle ones as well.
okay, so we've had good discussion on this, and I think Mike's point here about considering it from the employee's aspect. I don't mind driving my car up to Park Rapids or wherever we have to go for that annual meeting, but if I had to do it every day, I think maybe that's a much bigger risk. If something happens, you're gonna be out of service for a number of months, getting it fixed and everything else. So that's something we have to consider. That's maybe hasn't been put into the numbers here, as is the climate situation. And as long as other people are using them, which they seem to be, then we're not out of line in terms of what we're doing. So what does that leave us as a group then? Other than maybe needing 3, as Manager Anderson's concern was, my concern was that it's not a good investment from a financial aspect. But we've brought a lot of arguments that are important here that probably haven't been quantified into the equation. So
Well,
I'm more inclined to go with this.
the owner of Gregory Contractors has been using a Tesla for 3 years, a sedan. And I asked him about that, and he talked about the one day when it was very cold in Minnesota. He went a full 10 hours and still was back to his office before having to recharge. So, I mean, there's a lot of myth about how these things just don't stand up in the weather, but gas vehicles take more gas too, and I don't know. I think they're a good investment.
Manager Smalls?
Is that Manager Baki? Go ahead.
Yes, if I can chime in as well. The numbers that we're looking at are for new vehicles. And we know that depreciation is a huge thing when you drive a new vehicle off the lot. There are used vehicles that come off a lease situation with low miles. I'm wondering if Mr. Kinney, when he comes back with his research, could also look at that as an option, whether it's a EV or a hybrid or a regular gas vehicle, because there can be considerable savings if we look at a used vehicle rather than new.
I agree with that. That's how I bought most of my company vehicles. I also would like Mike to ask about a multiple discount, because that could be substantial and maybe save somebody from not using their personal car. Typically, when an employee uses their car for business routinely, they have to disclose that to their insurance company and pay more.
Mm-hmm.
Also be relieving the employee of that expense. So let's just look at it broadly. We may not go one direction or the other, but we'll come to a better educated discussion if we have those additional pieces brought to us.
Mr.
Okay,
President,
so
maybe just,
Cecilia wants to talk.
yeah, I mean, just very briefly, based on personal experience, the amount of, maintenance is a huge issue. What you save in maintenance, because there's half the number of pieces, and I had an EV for 4 years, and you couldn't even imagine the maintenance is like 10 times less than what typically you do in a regular. So if you're going to be doing that analysis, maintenance need to be put into the consideration too.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah,
President
thank you,
Small.
Celia, for speaking up. Thank you. Yes, Manager Lowe, was it?
Yeah, one point, I know that a lot of the car rental agencies have a huge inventory of electric vehicles that they're willing to part with for $20,000 I've seen. So that might be another route of getting a used vehicle that's EV at a steep discount.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if we're not driving it more than 4,000 or 5,000 a year anyway, right? So it's not like it's gonna be used up in 3 years. So, okay, so I guess what I hear was say, we'll ask Mike to come back and staff to come back with a little bit of a cleanup of this and looking especially at maybe the cost of buying a used vehicle, low mileage. The car off the lot. Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
one aspect. Taking all of
Okay.
the comments that were made together,
Yeah, they're right.
the full package, yeah.
All right, so then we'll move ahead on that, and then look at it the next meeting, and if they can get the analysis done by then, we can make a decision on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving into old business, floodplain vulnerability update.
Mr. President, managers, the board had asked at the December 18th meeting for some additional information. And so we have Emily, Cecilio, Camilla, and Dan Pfeiffer here. So so I don't know if Emily, if you want to kind of start the discussion, you've been helping to coordinate on behalf of the district, and then we can go through some of the items that the board had brought up at that previous meeting.
For Mr. President, managers, I was thinking that we could start with having EOR speak and give us a little update on the technical work that they've been doing, and then turn it over to Dan Pfeiffer with Zan Associates to speak more in depth about the community engagement and talk about the facilitation plan that was in the December 19th board packet. So actually, I might just hand it right over to Camilla then.
Thank you, Emily. Good evening. I was just going to quickly remind the board about sort of where we've been. You will recall last year, the board looked at different layers of information to try and identify where they thought they wanted to focus their efforts in terms of the flood risk or flood vulnerability assessment. And that work translated into the development of the hydrologic and hydraulic model that Cecilia and Bill have been working on. So at the last board meeting, Cecilia presented preliminary modeling results for the Comfort Lake urban area, Comfort Lake District, and Shields Lake. And that included floodplain maps from 2D modeling, which showed the extent of flooding and where critical infrastructure, roadways, and homes are potentially subject to flooding. Since that presentation to the board 2 weeks ago, we have summarized the infrastructure risk in a series of figures and tables, which we can use at the upcoming workshop. We are also in the process of summarizing the social risk by intersecting these new 2D floodplain footprints with the social vulnerability layer generated for phase 1 of the project, and that can also be shared at the upcoming workshop. And then we are also in the process of summarizing the environmental risk by intersecting again that same 2D floodplain footprint with the environmental layers that the board evaluated for phase 1 of the project. And those include impaired waters, native plant communities connected to groundwater, the soil erosion risk, and Minnesota Biological Survey sites of biodiversity significance. So now that we have this new, more accurate floodplain footprint or flood footprint, we can go back to those data layers that the board evaluated in phase 1 of the project to show the intersection of these floodplains with these layers of information, these resources, these communities that the district is interested in considering during the vulnerability process. We are in the process of just finalizing our technical memorandum, which will summarize this information, and we'll be sharing that with staff and the board in the coming weeks. And so I think we're in a really good position to share the information, the preliminary information that we've developed with the stakeholders and the public. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dan so he can walk the board through his approach to doing that.
Thanks, Camilla. Emily, did the slides get incorporated or should I share?
go ahead and share and then you can drive the slides. You should be able to share.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Good evening, board members. So for the workshop as was laid out in the facilitation plan, so we are identifying participants to invite to the workshop based on the risk mapping that Camilla had walked through previously. So the plan is to mail letters to those properties and then also to do door flyering. It helps to just kind of increase awareness and understanding that this is what it is, that it is not a just random mailer, that there's intention behind it. And really, the workshop goals, as laid out in the plan, better identify who is impacted by the flooding and why it's important to them. Have the workshop attendees identify those gaps in the watershed's prioritization methodology and locations of flood mitigation projects. Education, so educating stakeholders and residents on the watershed district's role in development of flood management to address kind of some of the misconceptions that might occur, and then become a trusted resource for communities which may experience flooding. And so the actual process of the workshop is really, we're looking to get, somewhere between 10 and 15 participants in the room to have that detailed discussion. We would start with kind of some basic overview and introductions, help lay out the process for the workshop, then have Camilla and the EOR team overview the risks, the flood risks the watershed district is facing. And then we would start going into kind of a series of facilitated discussions and activities. So the first one's around flood risk and impacts. And so the activity would be mapping exercises, specifically identifying community resources, and then also identifying where they've experienced flooding. And so by doing that, we can use a vellum paper on top of a map of the district that is similar in scale and size to what Camilla's team has created. And then as we draw those out, then we can end up overlaying them onto the what they have created, what the engineering side has created. Want to do it with starting with a clean slate first, so that we're not kind of influencing and leading people towards what they have experienced. And then having some discussion at their past experience around flooding, and then moving into identifying vulnerabilities. So talk about the local factors contributing to flooding, the environmental and socioeconomic vulnerabilities that are heightened by flooding, and community assets most at risk. And then move into a section that is on mitigation strategies. And so this really is kind of a presentation on the realm of possibilities. What is in the toolbox to help mitigate flood risks? And then having a discussion around strategies, brainstorming, and having an activity to help narrow strategies of what participants prefer. And then moving into a section on collaboration. So getting people to think about what everyone can do, and having some ideas around ideas and brainstorming resources, and then closing it out with kind of a recap and takeaways. The idea is that, you start kind of with what people know, and then you're moving them through potential mitigation strategies, and then closing out with having everyone think about what everyone can be doing to help mitigate for risk and what possibilities could be. And we've identified some initial dates. So the idea is that there's a community workshop, and then there's a couple-week gap period, and then the technical staffs from the agency partners, so cities, townships, the county, MnDOT, put them in a room about 2 weeks later. It gives us an opportunity to analyze the data that we gathered from the community members, and then have the same kind of workshop process with the technical staff while sharing what we heard from community members. And so there are questions that I can help answer. We haven't set a date for either of those. The idea for the community members one is narrowing it down, selecting one of those kind of 6 dates on the left-hand side of the screen. For the technical staff, since it's more of a daytime activity related to their professional lives and professional roles, we would send out more of a survey to the invitees to get availabilities and select the date that has the most amount of availabilities. Questions that I can answer?
President Schmaltz?
Manager Baki?
Yes, I have a question. I believe the initial date that was set for the community workshop was January 8th, yesterday, and that letters were sent out. And we had staff on hand in case anybody showed up, because we didn't cancel that. And that's my understanding anyway. I'm just wondering how many people did show up, and if they did show up, what was their interest or questions? Do we have any information about that?
Yep. So the letters that went out asked people to RSVP. So the people that RSVP'd, or the people that we invited by email, we did send them cancellation notices by email as part of the process. At last night's meeting, last night's location, I was there. I stayed for the first about 45 minutes to an hour of what would have been. And there was one property owner who is adjacent to Shields Lake who did come. He mentioned that he had been out of town, so he didn't make the RSVP deadline. And so collected contact information from him so that we could invite him to the new updated version when the new date is selected.
Did he have questions or observations or information to share?
Mostly just that he was looking forward to the discussion around it, that the flood risk is an important thing, and that he had mentioned that he had talked to Mike Kenny in the past about flooding around Shields Lake.
So just another question. We're only having one community meeting, is that correct, Dan?
Correct. One community workshop is planned, and then one technical staff is planned.
Right, so that would be 10 to 12 people if we're lucky to get that we get input from.
Yeah, the goal is somewhere between like 10 and 15 people of the properties that are in those flood risk areas to have that conversation with them.
Okay, so I'm still having a little trouble getting my head around how extensive this is in terms of sampling. If we have like 15 flood zone areas that are spread out across the area of the watershed, we might get one person from each area then? Is that what you're saying? Or we might have 6 from one area and none from the others? So I'm just wondering, how many flood areas do we really have? I think Cecilio mentioned later on here that we've got it's more specific information than I had thought we had. So that'll be good to look at later on if we have a chance.
Mr. President, maybe if I can quickly clarify. My understanding, once we put together the flood risk, a follow-up on that was to look at the areas in which we have in the city, and other areas that we had, those flooding really potentially being really important. And we selected those areas. I think then look at those areas and say, okay, yeah, let's send an invitation to this party here, this neighborhood, that neighborhood, the other neighborhood, based on the maps that we provided. So my understanding is that a significant amount of people that were invited, correct, or sent information to, but those are going to be very targeted because those are the people that either they're experiencing or have the potential to experience flooding. So they would be probably pretty interested in going to the meeting. But I don't know how many people, but I saw the list and it's pretty big.
And then,
Okay, thank you,
um,
Chair.
and district staff did send it to the, or is going to send it to the technical staff at the cities with the areas circled on the maps, to ask them, if they've had any contact with anyone, if there's any other areas that they have heard people talk about wet backyards, flooded basements, flooding, any of those kind of things, so that they can provide a little bit of comment on that.
Can I offer a comment too? At Cecilia's last presentation, he talked about the flooding in the commercial business areas, right, with Aldi and Walmart. And so I think the difficulty is that, it's hard to, Dan mentioned that they're also going to try flyering and trying to get some other people to participate, but without like an address, it's hard to get people to come. So hopefully the people who do come, who get a direct invitation, can also comment or express their concerns relative to this other type of flooding that has the potential to happen.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Is there additional information, Cecilia, that you're gonna show? I mean, you sent me something here tonight that looked like it was some progress in terms of isolating what areas are gonna be involved and where we're gonna sample from. It might be good for the board to see that. I just looked at it for 30 seconds. That's all the time I had before I came to the meeting.
Yeah, I
But
don't have
it's
those.
Right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have those maps with me. They're being created. The idea is that we'll be presenting this formally on the 23rd. Board meeting 23rd. We'll have a week to take a look at those maps and the content of the report, which is going to be pretty detailed. And then the goal is for me to review the report, complete report, either tomorrow or Monday. We'll send the report to staff. They will review it, will implement the changes, and will be part of the packet for the next meeting. So, yeah, that's the idea. And there will be more information, as Camila was mentioning, of what I showed you. We show you just the flooding map. There's a lot of things that are attached to that will be in the report.
President Schmaltz, another question I have is, in addition to the direct contact of people in the flood zones, how else will this information be shared? How is it going to be on the website? Will there be information shared with the city so they can include this as to the meeting that's going to occur in February?
It can be. It's kind of, we've had a lot of discussions back and forth on how wide it to be versus having those that are like affected by flooding, that are in those risk areas right now versus kind of a wider swath of it. And we can share it out wider. That is a possibility, but I'll let Mike talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Mr. President, managers, Manager Baki. So one of the things that's really, I guess the way I would maybe think of describing this is that by asking the residents, one of the things that differentiates the watershed districts to work to date with respect to water quality on that, that side is that we collect actual data, right? And then we're calibrating our water quality models with the actual data. So our data in this particular case is we're calibrating the model, if you will, by asking the residents, like, okay, how far up have you experienced the flooding in your backyard or in the street, or what have you seen? The city, Public Works, we have communication with them. We have different, we know that they've had some common experiences because we've heard from different individuals, and we know they've communicated the city and the district. So, but there may be other cases where they've contacted just the city staff that we're not aware of. So from this standpoint, then it's all preliminary information that, so, and we didn't want to just put it on Facebook or things like that at this point because it's not complete. The board hasn't accepted the final report, and we would not want then it to be misconstrued if there are some additional changes to be completed yet. So, so at this point, it has that sort of preliminary draft component to it that we're trying to, make sure that we're working out, but also giving, contacting those residents directly to make sure that they're aware and can provide feedback into the process, into the system, without having a lot of people coming that it may not be at all applicable to, and, potentially either causing some level of alarm or, maybe just having some expectation about us doing something that's not at all what we're trying to do yet at this point. So, and because it just is that, it's an iterative process, but the modeling is more detailed and complete than we would necessarily see in some other modeling work. And so that's our goal here, is to make sure it's accurate when we're presenting it out in the final format. If that helps at all in terms of answering your question.
I think it does. I think there are people in our community who are concerned about flooding, whether they've experienced it or not. And there are just maybe people who would be interested in getting more information. My opinion is that there isn't a panic out there yet, because we haven't really experienced the extreme flooding like they have in some areas of the country. But I just think that because we're investing in this process, we need to make sure that we have people in the community who can be involved if they want to be. And I'm just not seeing this information shared. And that's why we postponed it to February, is because there just wasn't much outreach that I could see. And I don't know what the other board members are seeing or not, but that's my opinion, is that I don't think we should be afraid to invite more than just those targeted people.
Also, managers, Mr. President, and Manager Baki. So this is just for these areas that the board had previously identified. So for example, we're not doing areas of the Bone Lake Management District, or Little Comfort, but rather the Shields Lake and this Comfort Lake Management District. So it's not district wide yet, and so we're focusing on these areas based off the previous discussion with the board last May and June. So that's another component of why it's not maybe as wide. It's not spread out as much as maybe that there would be some expectation for.
Okay, let me just repeat back to you what I think I've heard then. So it's what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending a personal letter to people that are in potential flood zone areas that we've identified, indicating that their residence is in a potential flood zone area. And we'd like them to come and learn more about what's happening and to share any personal experiences that they've had in that area. Is that correct? Is that kind of the gist we're going towards?
You're
Correct.
correct.
That's, yes, for this first step, yes.
Okay. I can't imagine people aren't going to be interested, especially if they had some little flooding already. What's your, Dan, have you done this in other areas? What's been the response? Or is this your first one on flooding?
This is my first one on flooding.
Okay.
The others have been around, mostly transportation projects and other kind of things. Flooding is something that a lot of people experience. They have an understanding of it. And I think between the letters and then also doing door hangers, dropping off flyers, people will realize they'll be interested in it and having the conversation.
Okay, thank you. Board, any other comments?
I would just say that I think this is probably a prudent approach. rather than to pick up the outliers who are going to have to be discounted because they're not affected by the discussion, but would want to be having a voice in a discussion that doesn't pertain to them. It's I see it as kind of a beta testing, run it out to the people who really are involved in it and then test it out.
So Mr. President, Manager Taves, yeah, that's a good point. The other piece is that it is an iterative process. I mean, we are intending to do this initial collection. We'll then have a meeting with more of the technical staff, bring it back to the board, final approval, and then the recommendation, at least at this point, from my perspective, would be that the board would then have staff do another public meeting of what we have found, and then do this much wider engagement. But we also we're trying to also to make sure we're getting the project done in a timely enough manner so we can start getting our foot in the door for some of the grant dollars in the next cycle. So further delaying then puts a risk of adding another year into some of these grants that are now available, both for stormwater, flood mitigation, Lessard Dam, things like that. So there is a timing element as well. So there is some thought given to that component of it. So, we're not trying to keep the public away by any means. We definitely want that, but it's a far more targeted approach in terms of looking to calibrate the model and the work that's been completed, and making sure that, when we talk to our partners and to the residents that could potentially be impacted, they would say, yeah, we would expect that, or okay, good to know. And then we can have a broader community discussion about it and get support after we're farther along in the project.
Manager Schmalz, or
Yeah,
President
go ahead,
Schmalz.
Manager Anderson.
I agree with both what Doug said and Mike. I feel much more comfortable that we understand thoroughly, the board does, on how exactly we're approaching this. And I think having this smaller meeting, if you will, in the beginning is a good idea. And we're going to have other meetings, public meetings on this project. And that's the way it should be. We should be including the public on all of our big projects. And because it impacts such a big area, I think we're going to have a good turnout. I would just make sure that in the materials that we're going to see at the next meeting, that will be the flyers and the information handed out at the meeting, that it's made very, very clear that we're talking about just the properties within our boundaries. So, make sure there's a map, make sure there's some very clear, distinct language that we're not talking about the entire Forest Lake and Wyoming area. We're talking about just the watershed.
Mm-hmm.
President
Okay, I
Schmalz.
think we all feel much more, we have a better understanding of where this is going and how we're gonna get there, so that's quite helpful. I do wanna point out, we don't wanna delay this, as Mike's key point, and lose a year here with grants, so. So I think we're willing to move this as fast as we have to, once we get some initial feedback from the public. The other question I have, though, is that one of the things we haven't talked about, and I'm not suggesting we do this right now or use this information to make any other decisions, but it'd be good for the board sometime to understand is who finally makes the decisions on a project like this for the community. Do we have to go to the city council, or how does this eventually get done and get implemented over time? Now, obviously, some other people are ahead of us on this. So what have we learned, or what have people learned about how to get this sold to get some meaningful impact for the community? I guess that's the question that I still don't understand how we're gonna do that. And so any insight into that later on, not immediately, but sometime down the road, just so we know what's over the hill that we can't see over yet. When we start going down the slope to really get the orders, so to speak. So just a point of information, Mike.
Yes, Mr. President, I can give a little summary, but I see Manager Loth has had his hand up for a while here, so.
Manager, go ahead.
Am I good?
Yes,
I just wanted to comment, I think I understand the approach with the workshop type focus comes first. We get some real information and the ability to calibrate the model. I'm just wondering if in a parallel fashion, if like from a public outreach standpoint, we can share about the work that's being done without asking for engagement, just so that we're patting ourselves on the back. And I guess to speak to Manager Baki's point that we're outreaching and letting the public know other things that we're involved with other than just, you know, what the lakes are doing. So that at some point, you know, maybe instead of it being a workshop, it's more of just an educational session down the road that ties in some of the information that's received in a workshop type format.
That's what the next public meeting would be about. But I agree with what both you and Manager Baki are saying.
Yeah.
Is get the word out and let people know we're doing it. And the easy thing to do is to have an article in the local papers.
well,
Put
this
it
falls back, I
and put
think,
it on
back to a more
and put it
aggressive education outreach program, you know, by having this PR firm brought on board and let them help us do that part of it too, so
Well,
it
and
all
that,
fits together.
yeah, and that's fine, but make sure that that is covered. I think that's what we're all saying.
Right.
Make sure that's part of the plan.
Yeah, Mr. President, managers, great suggestion there, Manager Baki, and I see Adam Jalm is on the call tonight, and so sure we can coordinate with him in terms of some of our standard communications that are going to go out without going into the actual details of the mapping, but we could communicate to the community that we're doing this work. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Thank you.
Any
Mr.
other
Chair?
comments or questions?
Yeah, very quickly, just remind you that what you're seeing here, I think maybe you can see the map that I put in there. Maybe I'm not sharing, but yeah, this is the public. This is the area, obviously, that is urbanized, that is pretty dense. But we are going to be also looking at the rest of the Sunrise River going to Comfort Lake. And this is not maybe many people that in here, but there are going to be considerations like ecological considerations, like groundwater issues, and all that is going to be also part of the conclusions of this. So I want to mention that we may be looking at the city and then trying to kind of solve some of the problems, but the purpose of the study is a little bit bigger, and identifying areas that maybe we can potentially board can purchase in the future, or we can have like a regional planting areas or restoration, and that's also going to be part of the report, not just the city.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I think it's important to talk about and maybe have a couple of slides, maybe do already or thinking about it, is to have the slides that built up to this. And I'm talking about the sub-watersheds and how that was created, how that project followed the flow of the water and where the major basins were within each of those areas. And so that's how we came up with even understanding. We have to understand the water flow. And then the type of development that happens within each one of those. And we're talking about our most urban area here now. And most people don't understand that the water from that commercial area of Forest Lake is what comes down to Comfort. So make sure you have that sort of educational piece in it as well.
Yeah, that's Manager Anderson. That's a very good point. And also just a general, not to make things very complicated here, but just general statement that sometimes in order to prevent or improve or decrease flooding issues, the way to do it is basically bringing more water downstream.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that happened, I mean, we have the model of everything else, so we can see the impact on, you know, the Sunrise River and the areas downstream of this. So we'll be able to assess if, you know, it makes sense, because bringing water downstream is probably something that, yeah, I have a problem here. We just put a bigger pipe, put some ponding areas, connect this area, that area, just bring it downstream. It's the model is going to tell you what kind of impact it's going to have. So it's
good. Perfect.
Okay, any other comments or anything else from our consultants?
No, I feel a lot more comfortable today,
Yep.
this presentation.
Yeah, I do too, and I think, you know, it's good to feel that way. So we know where we're going now, and we've got a path, and we know the data's
Yeah.
gonna be used in a certain way, and so that's good, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, no other questions, let's move on then, to program and project updates. Thank you, by the way, for the presentations, Camelia and everyone, and your note back to me, Cecilia, was helpful too, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep, thank you.
So program project update, Mike, did you wanna mention something here, or?
No, I just said, you had asked about it, so we kind of had decided that because of the, this additional update, the business meeting, and then presently the board will have 5 meetings in the month of January. 2 of the regular meetings, the 2 for the strategic planning, the workshop next week, Thursday, for my review, and then potentially another one at the end of the month. So we just thought we would leave that. The only other piece that I did want to add to the last discussion that does relate to this, district did have awarded that other accelerated implementation grant. So I think it was $126,000. And so that, in addition to the MPCA grant that's helped fund the development of the model, this other work we can use to run the scenarios of the model, a little bit of which Cecilia just talked about, is, where in the system would we potentially see some benefits from doing different projects. So we would fully expect the 80-20 rule to apply. And so using that, we don't want to necessarily charge out there and do every last project that we could come across, but rather which ones are going to be the most impactful. So, and we kind of have our sights set on one, but it's not in the area that where we currently have the model. It happens to be over on Bone Lake. But, in terms of the whole district, that may be the most impactful one of all, but still, we will want to know, of the, roughly 30% of the land area that is wetland and open water, where are we're best suited to store water without causing flooding, backwater flooding upstream, and let alone, providing protection downstream. So that'll be something else coming into the works. We're working on the work plan and getting that grant ready for execution. Those will come back to the board probably in March for, for the resolution and agreement with Bowser, but something else that's coming.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for the update. Nothing else then, let's move on then to summary and approval of board direction. Before we do that, I want to ask just a quick checking question. I had dropped the managers a note about their plan to participate in the January 16th meeting with Mike on discussing his SMART goals, et cetera. Manager Bakke is going to be out of the country, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody's going to be planning on attending that or most of the meeting. Manager Anderson, you replied that you're going to be there, so I know your answer, but Manager Bakke and Manager Loth and Taves? I meant Manager Bakke, I meant Manager Loth and Manager Taves. So will you be able to attend that meeting?
I will have to make an arrangement to get out of work for that. I'll see what I can do tomorrow.
Okay, just.
Do we want to wait,
Manager Loth?
Steve, do we want to wait until Manager Bakke's back in?
Well, that's what I'm looking at. I mean, if we could all be there, I mean, otherwise we're gonna have this, we'll be doing this in March and April again. And I don't think it's good for us to drag this thing out. We kind of set a schedule at the end of November that we all kind of agreed to, and
yeah,
I'd like to stick to that if we can. If we can't, then we'll have to change it. That's kind of what I'm trying to work through right now.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, how do you feel about that meeting? Or can we change the time on it? Maybe make it later? And maybe have it at the office, and then we won't have to get into your work time, Doug. Would that help you?
That would
Not
help
really.
me.
Sorry. It's not really the time next week. we're leaving town on the 17th, so, if I can be prepared to attend, I will. I'd say probably 60% chance I can attend.
And the other thing would be that you could just actually go through and make your comments and send that in to the meeting. I mean, what we need to do is have your evaluation and any key points you wanna make. So you don't necessarily have to be there to do it. It would help, I guess, but I'm just kind of concerned that if we move the date, we'll have the same problem again. Because of your schedule, so it's pretty tough. Do you work in the evening at all, Doug, or do you, cause if we started at 5 and went to 7:30 or something like that and do it in the office, would that facilitate your needs or not?
My schedule is till 5 o'clock, so after 5 o'clock, give me a couple minutes to get to the office, I can be there.
Right, okay.
I can
That's not
check
gonna help
tomorrow.
them.
I could possibly back it up too. I've just got to talk to them about that. I have eye surgery next week too, so I'm already missing a day and a half.
If it's possible to move it towards the end of the month, I do return on the 25th of January.
How about that? Does that work for,
Well, we have our next meeting. When's the next meeting set? Isn't it the
23rd? Is it? Oh, it was 23rd.
28.
23rd. I'm looking at it. Next regular board meeting, January 23rd, 2025.
And strategic planning on the 28th.
How does that week look for Chris and Doug? And
That's actually better for me if it, again, I don't want to prolong the process either.
oh,
But
Emily's,
that week is better for me.
yeah, Emily's got a note that strategic planning is on January 21st too. That week.
Yeah, well, we had another follow-up meeting sent towards the end of the month to finalize everything. What date was that on? I thought it was the 28th from 6 to 8. Wasn't it?
For the review, you mean?
Yes.
Data review?
So we could use that to start over and just do the first part of it then, and then maybe do everything at one meeting.
Yeah,
If we did some advanced preparation, everybody thought about how they felt about things, we could get through it pretty quickly.
Yeah. Do you have a sheet of some kind? Is that what you said you're gonna send out, or how is this gonna
No,
work?
I've already sent it out. We sent it out in end of November, and then I've sent out 2 announcements since then, reminding everybody about the dates.
Well, I'll go back and look at that.
So I think it's the 28th, but maybe we can move it to that then. You're back to 25th, right, Dave?
Yes, I'm back on the 25th.
Yeah, if you need give it a day or so to recover would be good before you went into that meeting, so maybe the 28th would work. Let me look at that date and I'll get back to you with an email real quick. And Chris, you have to, if we move it then you'll have to decide whether you can participate then or not, but it sounds like maybe we should probably move this. Although, Mike, I still would like you to get your stuff out on the 10th if you can, so we can start working on it ahead of time. I can provide some direction there.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
yeah, just Mr. President, managers, yes, I'm still at this conference and I think I'm gonna be, because of the pending storm. I'll probably be leaving here about 4 in the morning and then driving tomorrow. So, but I'll work on it, over the weekend and get that out.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Let's move on then. I'll get a note out to everybody and try to move that to the 28th, if that's the date we've set, and, cause that should be on your calendars already. And that's after 6 o'clock. Maybe we can start at 5 then and maybe pick up some extra time, but I'll put together a proposal and send it out to everyone.
5:30, remember? Doug doesn't stop working until 5. So we have to give him time, maybe 5:20.
Right, 5:30, yeah.
Okay.
Or 6 would work, but, okay, so, are we now into summary and approval of board direction? Chuck, do you have anything that you captured?
Mr. Chair, just that Mr. Kinney will return with additional analysis of the vehicle purchase option. And then a number of manager comments regarding the floodplain vulnerability project, which I trust the participants took note of.
Okay, any other comments or additions to what Chuck has? Okay, if not, then, unless there's any other comments or questions that anybody wants to bring up, we can adjourn. See any hands going up, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Manager Anderson. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Manager Taves. So then if Victoria could do the roll call for us to close out the meeting?
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Love,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
and President Schmaltz.
Aye. Okay, so we moved, the meeting is closed. Thanks everyone for your input and thanks to EOR and other consultant to help us, get a better understanding of how we're gonna proceed here. So that was very helpful. Thank you all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.